Welcome to Batya on NewsNation. I'm Batya Ungar-Sargon, and we begin with what we learned about America this week. 4 Americans are dead after an illegal migrant driving a semi-truck swerved into oncoming traffic and struck a van, killing 4 people. 3 of them were from the same Amish family, Henry Eicher and his 2 sons, Paul and Menno. An American family utterly destroyed by an illegal immigrant. The Eichers join other Americans like Sabina Durden-Coulter and Marcus Coleman, who you met on this show last week. Sabina's son Dominic was killed by an illegal migrant driving a truck, and Marcus's 7-year-old daughter, Delilah, sustained such severe brain damage, she lost the ability to talk.
I hear that all the time. Well, he could have been killed by an American, and it's just a few. But where's the limit? 5, 10, 20,000?
I think people need to understand the true severity behind it. They want to have the American dream, but they don't want to go the correct routes, and they robbed my daughter of her American dream.
Where are the protests for them? The Eichers, like Dominic and Delilah, were failed by everyone. The Biden administration, who paroled the driver into the country. The state of Pennsylvania, which issued him a CDL. The trucking company that employed him instead of an American citizen, no doubt paying him lower wages. This tragedy exemplifies what the immigration debate is actually about for so many Americans. It's why new polls from this week found that a clear majority of Americans still support deporting all migrants in the country illegally, despite all of the drama in Minneapolis. A new Harvard-Harris poll conducted at the end of January, crucially after the tragic deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, found that 52% of Americans still support deporting every illegal migrant. A new Marquette poll found 56% support for deporting every illegal migrant. A Signal poll found an even higher number, 61% support for mass deportations of all illegal migrants. It's true that polling has also found Americans losing confidence in ICE. Yet the Signal poll also found that most Americans still want ICE engaged in mass deportations. The lesson is pretty obvious. Americans still support the agenda. They just want a little bit of a softer touch, as the president put it to NBC this week. This will be crucial for the midterms, especially for Hispanic voters, a demographic the Republicans absolutely need in order to keep the House. Trump won big with Hispanic voters in 2024, surprising many Democrats who assumed that Latinos would approve of Biden's lax border policies. But many in the Latino community are actually quite hawkish on immigration, especially those who live along the border. 1/3 of ICE agents are Hispanic and 50% of Border Patrol agents. And still, many polls show that Trump is actually losing support with Hispanics. So here to discuss is Texas GOP congressional candidate Abraham Enriquez, Jose Aristimuño, former Deputy National Press Secretary for the DNC, and journalist for Compact Magazine, Juan Rojas. I am so thrilled to have you guys here. This is the exact panel that I have been waiting to assemble and to hear from, because you each come from a different point of view. So I want to start with you, Abraham. Is Trump losing Latinos?
No, absolutely not. Look, you know, when I was a national surrogate to the president's campaign back in 2024, and I was a delegate to the state of Texas to the RNC convention, I was blown away with the night at the convention where mass deportations was the center focus of the convention. And it got the most round of applause. The entire stadium roared because mass deportations no longer is about race. It never really was. When you look at the southern part of Texas, central Arizona, the outskirts of Nevada, Ohio, Georgia, Pennsylvania, swing counties, swing districts that are majority Hispanic actually swung over more than 50% of the vote to President Trump, because we saw that negatively illegal immigration actually negatively affects Hispanic communities the most. And finally, President Trump, as the leader of the Republican Party, was talking about how this hit Hispanic members of America, and that's why he got the most share of Hispanic voters any presidential candidate has ever seen in the history of the United States.
Jose, how do you see things?
Well, look, I think we can't, we can't debate that most people want border security, and I think that's exactly right. That's both Democrats and Republicans. But the way that ICE has been executing some of these policies, it's completely wrong. A majority, as you were pointing out, a majority of Americans disapprove of the way that ICE is handling immigration. When you're talking about killing innocent American lives, it is horrible. There's no excuse. You cannot defend that, no matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. And then not only that, but we're actually destroying the economy. If the economy wasn't bad enough as it is, people are not coming out in Minnesota. American citizen folks are closing their businesses because they are afraid of ICE terrorizing their communities. So it should, and by the way, before Republicans come out and say that Democrats want to abolish ICE, we do not want to abolish ICE. ICE is a much needed body of enforcement, but it needs to be reformed.
Juan, speaking of the economy, you wrote an incredible piece for the Liberal Patriot, in which you argued that Democrats, and this is from the left, you're arguing this, need a pro-worker platform on immigration, that the way that the Democrats talk about immigration really erases the way in which the open border and having so much access to cheap illegal labor has really hurt workers. Can you summarize the argument that you made for us?
I'll try my best. I appreciate hearing from Jose saying that he doesn't want to abolish ICE. I mean, I guess theoretically I could go along with it so long as there's a clear commitment that in a post-ICE, theoretical post-ICE future, there will still be, enforcement of duly enacted laws. The problem is that under Biden, essentially, if you got past the border, you were at no risk of being deported. Interior enforcement fell from to like 50,000 a year. That was down from like 100,000 under Trump and 200,000 under Obama. So the policy, unfortunately, under Biden, it translated to mass asylum fraud, tons of economic migrants coming into the country through asylum. And I believe in asylum, but the problem is if you want to actually help people that have legitimate claims to asylum, real asylees, people that are persecuted, fleeing violence, stuff like that, or from different governments, you need to be willing at the end of the process to deport people, and that's not what we saw under Biden. So from a Democratic point of view, if you actually want to help people that are fleeing persecution, embrace deportation. I also propose adopting a point system. I think that would help a lot with nativism that we see in the country as well. Adopting E-Verify also. We need to, this is the bulk of it actually. The genesis of illegal immigration, it's because we don't punish employers. All of the enforcement is on employees, against illegal immigrants, and not the businesses that employ them. And why is that? It's very obvious within both parties. No one talks about this because businesses love to have their cheap labor.
I think that's such a great point, Abraham, and I wonder what you make of that. I mean, so much of the enforcement is on the deportations. I support them. I think the polling reflects where the American people are at, but there has been very little by way of going after employers, corporations who abuse the system and give jobs to these millions of people who are here illegally. What's your reaction to that?
No, I agree completely, which is why President Trump, every step of the way, has always said that he supports policies like ensuring big corporations are following through with programs like E-Verify. The problem really boils back down to liberal states, blue states, that enforce things like sanctuary city laws that basically make it impossible for ICE and DHS to do their jobs appropriately, right? I actually toured one of the largest deportation centers in Ohio. And most people would have you believe that, people like me are in those detention centers, people that look like me, when in fact I maybe saw a handful of Hispanics. What I saw with my own eyes were more Chinese nationalists and people from the Middle East. When President Otto gave us, I think, 96 people coming across the border in one day that are on the U.S. terror watch list, this no longer becomes about race, but becomes about national security. And when big corporations aren't held accountable for enticing that kind of flow of illegal immigration, you got to point back to the states that have made it impossible for some of those policies to be enacted in how they do business in those blue states.
But Abraham, do you just not believe the polls that show cratering support for the president among Hispanic voters?
No, I mean, you're talking about the same polls that said in 2024 President Trump was going to lose Texas, was going to lose Florida. and was going to have lower Hispanic participation than in 2016. In fact, all those three weren't true. And what we see with your own polls that you just noticed or notified was that actually increasingly number of Hispanics are still remain loyal to the president's deportation agenda.
I guess that's something we're going to see. Jose, I wanted to ask you to respond to Juan's point about labor, about the fact that the Democrats' refusal to take immigration seriously has actually led them to lose the working class. I mean, this is a theory that a lot of people believe. What is the Democrats' plan when it comes to immigration going forward to convince those voters that they actually care about their wages?
Yeah, look, it's a great point, and I agree partly with one. I do think that both Republicans and Democrats need to go after the employers, not only after the people who just are looking to get a job. At the end of the day, who decides if you want to get hired is the employer. It's not the illegal immigrant, right? So we ought to be very, very, very clear. But there's special interest in politics, no matter which side. I do think that we need comprehensive immigration reform, and I'm not talking about amnesty. Everybody legalize everybody. No, I think there should be standards. I think people should get to the back of the line. People should learn English. We should deport the criminals. I think the problem is that we're not only deporting the criminals, we're deporting the mothers, the children. So, some folks are U.S. citizens and they end up being returned by accident. So a bunch of things are happening in the country that need to stop. But the only way that we do it is to stop bickering at each other and say, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, let's get together. What happened to the good old days when Barack Obama and John Boehner used to go play golf? That's what we need to see. Just so much hate in America today. It's just so sad what happened to Charlie Kirk and many other folks. We need to turn down the volume, sit down at the table. I hope that the president is watching this. Get the Republicans and the Democrats together in the Oval Office, and do not leave this office until we pass some sort of comprehensive immigration reform.
But Jose, when you say that we're only going to deport the criminals, why is that not just a green light to everybody who comes here illegally to keep trying their best to get here illegally, because they know that as long as they don't commit another crime, they will just be allowed to stay? Why doesn't that incentivize exactly the kind of open border mass migration we saw under Biden?
Well, the people are already here, right? So we got to do something. I'm happy to do something moving forward. But these people already, they broke the law, yes. But is it realistic to deport 10 million, 11, 12 million people? By the way, most of them, the only crime they committed was to cross the border. I think economically does not make sense. I think Americans don't want to do a lot of the jobs that those people are willing to do. So I just think it doesn't make sense economically. And logistically wise, I think it's a mess.
Juan, the country was really taken by this photo of this little boy, Liam, in the blue hat, whose father came here illegally with him. He was then detained by ICE. They say the father fled when they tried to detain him and that the mother would not take him in. He was taken to a deportation center, visited by a lot of Democrats, much ballyhooed, and then released. Aren't they the exact kind of asylees you talk about in your piece, who really do not have a legitimate asylum claim, who there has to be consequences for because people came here, falsely claimed asylum, were allowed in, and then faced no consequences for it?
Yeah, and frankly, I sympathize with anyone who comes here. The vast majority of people, economic migrants, they're not bad people. They're extremely hardworking. A lot of times they love the United States of America. But the system just cannot work if if you're just not willing to enforce the laws. As I said before, I will say, the intro to this segment, there's a sleight of hand that's used from both sides a lot of the time. This effort to try from the right to try to say that all illegal immigrants are criminals, whatever. The data shows that that's not the case. We can dispute this. And culture, has tried to go after some points. But this kind of just makes sense. I mean, if you're here illegally, the last thing you want to do is commit a crime so that you'll get deported. That said, well, as you pointed out also in the segment, every crime like this that occurs wouldn't have happened if we would have more control over our borders. And I think Trump should be applauded for drastically reducing border crossings. It's basically zero. That said, last thing I wanted to say to Abraham, I think definitely that the administration has lost a lot of support among Latinos and among the general population. The problem, it's one thing to just deport people, but we're seeing something really novel. These deportations to third maximum security countries where the immigrants aren't from. There was a horrific case here um, in South Florida. A Trump-supporting Cuban illegal immigrant was deported to a maximum security prison in Eswatini. And so, obviously, you do this kind of stuff, you're gonna lose legitimacy. It's an own goal, and it ends up empowering the kind of mass migration advocates that many on like the labor left and on the Republican side don't want to empower. But it'll just end up being an endless circle, an endless spiral.
Jose, we got a list of demands from the Democrats in terms of what they would accept in terms of the kinds of reforms to ICE that I think a lot of people are looking for. We have here, they want targeted enforcement, no more masks, ID for the ICE agents, uphold use of force standards, ensure state and local oversight. I think there is a lot of common ground here. For example, the body cams have already been implemented by DHS. The one thing I think is going to be a real sticking point is the no masks policy. The administration, of course, is arguing that threats to the lives of ICE agents are up by 8,000%. We know that they're being doxxed. We know that they're being physically attacked. We know that they're going after gangs, which is dangerous in and of itself. Do you think that the Democrats and the administration are going to be able to find common ground here?
I do think so. I think a majority of this demands are common sense. We might not get all of them. I think maybe if we get a majority of them, I think we'll be happy with that. I'm glad to see that the president sent Tom Homan to Minnesota to meet with the governor. There's been a reduction of 700 officers. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And again, yes, I should be funded. DHS should be funded, but it should be funded in a smart and targeted way. So I do think, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that we'll find some common ground. We might not get all 10 points, but at least maybe get half of them, if not a little more.
And you think the Democrats will settle for half?
I think so. I think they don't have a choice the same way that the president doesn't have a choice than to play negotiate with us.
Well said. Abraham Enriquez, Jose Aristimuño, and Juan Rojas, God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
President Trump wants Americans to show ID when voting, but Chuck Schumer and the Democrats alike are pushing back. How do voters feel about it? We're going to get into that right next. The president made alarming comments this week about nationalizing our elections, something explicitly forbidden by the Constitution. But the concerns over our elections being free and fair is one shared by many Americans. A whopping 83% of Americans want a government-issued photo ID to be required before voting. That represents 85% of white Americans, 82% of Latino Americans, and 76% of Black Americans. It's prompted Republicans to push the Senate to take up the SAVE Act, a law that would require Americans to prove their citizenship when registering to vote, and also regular voter roll purges. Here's how the Democrats are talking about the SAVE Act.
The SAVE Act is an abomination. It's Jim Crow 2.0 across the country. We are going to do everything we can to stop it.
Really? Jim Crow 2.0? Someone should tell 76% of Black voters. Democrats say there's little evidence of voter fraud, and they are right about that. So what exactly is the problem with asking for proof of citizenship? In a democracy, when 83% of the electorate wants something, it's my view that they should get it. Here to discuss is Malik Abdul, political strategist, and Yemisi Egbiwole, former chief of staff to the Biden White House press office and a Barbara Boxer fellow at USC's Center for the Political Future. Thank you both so much for being here. So, Yemisi, the SAVE Act, is it Jim Crow 2.0?
No, I don't think it's considerably Jim Crow-esque, but I do understand the concerns of those in Democratic leadership that are listening to their constituents that come from surprising demographics, including married women who see the difficulty in this. I think for a lot of members, their concern is, how do you go to your constituents and say, I voted for a bill that now requires a passport, something that a lot of Americans don't have and costs like upwards of $100 to get, or birth certificates sometimes that people don't have access to. And for a lot of younger folks, when I was in college, I voted by mail because I lived outside of the state where my parents resided in, and I wanted to vote in Georgia because I still considered myself a Georgia resident that was on loan to the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I think the overarching narrative, too, is that you also have a president who's saying that he lost an election because we bused a lot of immigrants to these polling locations. So I think they have to contend with the narrative that the president is giving, but also look to their constituents who some issues with this.
Yeah, Malik, we've talked about this before, how the president can muddy what are actually very unifying issues with his rhetoric. The White House was trying to say that his commentary on nationalizing elections was about the SAVE Act. Did you buy that?
No, I didn't buy it because he ended up coming out. And I just have 3 quick points to make about this. I'm glad you actually had the polling. The polling is absolutely correct. And it has been that way for years. There are court cases that have been decided when it comes to voting, or you presenting a voter ID. That, and I think your audience should know, that is referencing when you go inside the polls to actually vote, let's say on election day or during an election. The problem that I have, though, even though I do think that everyone should have a voter ID going into the polls. The problem that I have here is similar to the same problem that I had with Democrats, where they wanted to prevent the states from being able, essentially federalizing the election, preventing states from requiring people to actually show ID in the polls. And I am someone who really does believe in states' rights. And I do believe that some of these requirements seem to supersede states' rights. So it's one thing to have a voter ID requirement to vote in person. It's something else to say that you need to show your papers in order to register to vote. And I think that's what some people are kind of conflating. But I do have a problem with what seems to be an effort to do the exact same thing that Democrats wanted to do when it comes to nationalizing the elections.
I wanted to get your take on this as well. Yemisi, we saw the return of Kamala Harris this week. The Kamala Harris Twitter account, HQ, teased some big revelation. It turned out to be that she's going to turn it into some sort of hub for young people. I think a lot of people on the right greeted the return of Kamala Harris with a lot of glee, very excited at the prospect of her being the 2028 nominee, but they're not the only ones. If you take a look at the polling here, we have a full screen of this. At the 2028 contenders on the Democratic side, just look at that. Kamala Harris at 39%. Yemisi, what is your take on this, on her being such a strong candidate in the polling, despite, I think, what many Americans feel about her?
I think she has the most name recognition, given that we're just a year out from the past election. However, I think a lot of people, especially Democrats, are looking for a wide range of candidates. This is the first time for a lot of folks that they're going to be able to vote for someone that isn't of the Obama, Clinton, Biden era-esque. They're going to be able to vote for people outside of these big name individuals. And one of the things I think Harris will run into if she decides to run is fundraising. The DNC is still paying off a heavy cost of the last election. You've got people in this race, possibly, like a J.B. Pritzker, who can self-fund. You've got a Gavin Newsom, who's a really good fundraiser, being the governor of California. Money plays a huge part in electability as well. Now, I'm not sure that on the fundraising end, she would be able to pull something off.
Such an interesting point. Malik, Michelle Obama, former First Lady, keeps saying that the country is not ready for a woman president and that this is sort of why Kamala Harris did not do better. What is your reaction to those kinds of claims?
Well, I honestly wish at this point that the First Lady, the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, would just stop, because if she's not complaining about sexism, she's complaining about racism, she's complaining about whether or not she's able to wear her hair in a certain way. I just wish that she would go take some sort of initiative and do something else. I think that the country is ready for a woman president, but as with all things, it depends on who that is. Kamala Harris was not popular when she was running for president the first time around. We saw what happened when she got mollywopped by Donald Trump, losing all of the battleground states. To suggest that somehow this is only because of sexism, it ignores the obvious problems that many people had with Kamala Harris. They're just not into her.
Yemisi, final word before we move on to the next topic.
I think Harris has to do a lot of inroads when it comes to young voters, and I'm not sure that this new launch is the thing that's going to do it.
Well put. All right. Malik Abdul and Yemisi Egbiwole, stick with us. We want you for the next block. Coming up, we're going to be talking about New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, who made a very questionable hospital visit. I'm going to explain, and we're going to dive into how his policies are impacting New Yorkers. That's next. This week, New York City Mayor Mamdani visited a man in the hospital who was shot by an NYPD police officer after charging the officer with a knife. Jabez Chakraborty's family called 911 to report him having a psychotic episode. And here's the body cam footage of what happened next. We want to warn you that the footage you're about to see is difficult to watch.
Baba, no! Hey, put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife, move! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Drop the knife! Drop the knife! Drop the knife!
The cops did everything right. They tried to de-escalate. They closed the door to the vestibule. They even did something progressives are always demanding. They didn't shoot to kill. Mr. Chakraborty is in the hospital recovering. But it was the would-be cop assassin who Mayor Mamdani visited, who he portrayed as the real victim here. One of Mamdani's proposals during the campaign was to dispatch social workers to scenes like this one. Had his stupid proposal been in effect, that social worker would have been stabbed to death. Just look at the size of the knife Mr. Chakraborty was wielding. But for the grace of Mamdani's stupid progressive policies not being in effect goes some unlucky, unsuspecting social worker. This is progressive cruelty disguised as compassion, and it is appalling. But it's far from a one-off. Mamdani confirmed this week that 13 New Yorkers perished from the cold. They died thanks to his own policies. Weeks ago, Mamdani instructed the NYPD to stop performing sweeps of homeless encampments. Just one more example of how the policies that make progressives feel morally superior actually create unbelievable amounts of suffering. Siding with criminals instead of law enforcement, like siding with the homeless over the working class people forced to live amongst them, makes progressives feel compassionate. It makes them feel morally chic, while actually being unbelievably cruel and dangerous. Somehow it's never the well-to-do progressives who have to live with the consequences of their pieties. Here with us now, let's bring back Malik Abdul, political strategist, and Yemisi Egbiwole, former chief of staff to the Biden White House press office. Thank you both for being here. Malik, did you see this story, and what was your reaction to Mayor Mamdani's visit to the would-be cop assassin?
It's very tough to watch. And on the other hand, what Mamdani, what he did here reminded me of what happened during 2020, during the whole Black Lives Matter era, where many people around the country, they were pushing for these sort of progressive virtue signaling policies, whether it was, creating Black Lives Matter Plaza. It was a lot of virtue signaling that was going on. And what he as mayor should have done, because I do think that it's appropriate to talk about mental illness. Clearly that was the case here, but that doesn't mean that you have to show up at the hospital of the quote unquote victim here. What he should have been doing was actually amplifying the work of the very brave police officers who, as you said, did not shoot to kill, which is what exactly what progressives have argued that police should be doing all along.
Yeah, Yemisi, I mean, one of the things that was notable, if you listen to the 911 call, was the person calling, it was a member of Mr. Chakraborty's family, was asked, is he armed? And she said no, because at the time he wasn't, meaning that if Mamdani's policy was in effect, they literally would have sent a social worker to that scene.
Yeah, and the family made a statement saying that they wanted EMS there on site. Okay, well, the officers knocked on the door, and if you did not see EMS, you should have kept the door closed and said, I will allow the officers in when EMS gets there. I mean, this is the problem with a lot of far left policy is it ignores the fact that law enforcement is good for community. Officers that remain engaged with community and build trust protect the residents. And it is so unfortunate to have watched an officer do everything he could, even leaving that son in the room with the mother and the knife, which I know he probably did not want to do, but putting a barrier in between. And we have to draw a line of when is enough when it comes to police engagement? Yes, I have seen videos where I've thought, yes, maybe a social worker would have been better in this case, but this is simply not one of them. And for him to go to the hospital breaks down the inroads that he has made with law enforcement by keeping the NYPD commissioner, which Kathy Hochul was very complimentary of him. I mean, when he came into this position, one of his biggest criticisms was he does not have a good relationship with law enforcement, and the NYPD matters to all of those boroughs. This, I think, has set him back unnecessarily.
Could not agree more. Now, Malik, I just wanted to get your reaction to a video that was posted to the president's Truth Social account. It was a minute-long video about hacked voter machines. But the last 2 seconds of the video represented, here you can see the Obamas as monkeys, which is, of course, a despicable racist trope. Now, the president has since deleted it. We're going to talk about that later in the show, but I wanted to get your reaction to this.
Well, it's good that the president actually released it. You had people like Senator Tim Scott, my home state senator, of Roger Wicker of Mississippi, condemning condemning this. Actually, Trump reposted this. Whether he did it, which I actually believe that Trump did it, or a staffer did it, I think it just feeds into a narrative that this White House has had when it comes to black people in general. And if you want to know why you don't have more black people willing to consider the Republican Party, economics won't even matter when you have things just like this. They'll continue to refer to this as why they won't vote for Republicans, because Republicans are racist.
Absolutely. I mean, just undoing so much of the work that people have put in trying to say, look, why can't black Americans have a choice between two parties like everybody else? Yemisi, your reaction to the video?
I was disappointed that the press secretary doubled down and she equated it to kind of the TDS. Look, I will admit when Democrats have TDS, but this has got to be universal, that it's unacceptable. It also shows sloppiness. I think a lot of people probably watched that video on his staff and didn't get to those final seconds. And I know that the president runs off of authenticity, and he's great at that, being in the moment. But these are times when snap judgments and levels of approval for what get posted online matter.
Yeah, and his victory in 2024 was inextricably linked with getting people of color to vote for Republicans for the first time in their lives. Malik, is all of this trolling going to cost him the midterms?
I think it's a problem, and this is something that the administration, whether it's DEI, the Haitians eating dogs and cats, these are sort of microaggressions and stereotypes that people, and it doesn't matter who you are, you feel these type of things. But I'm glad that you had many people calling him out, because this is something he has now the potential to undo all of the gains he just made in 2024.
Yemisi Agbiwole, Malik Abdul, God bless and protect both of you. Thank you so much for being here for this wonderful conversation. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
It's Bad Bunny's Halftime versus Turning Point USA's Which One Will Americans Tune Into? We discuss it next as we look ahead to Sunday's Super Bowl festivities. The biggest sports event of the year is here. It's Super Bowl Sunday, and many of you will be watching the game. Even more of you will be watching the halftime show, whose musical performer this year is the rapper Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny's announcement was controversial, given that the singer, who's from Puerto Rico, frequently performs in a dress and has no songs in English. He'll be performing in Spanish. It got even more controversial when he condemned ICE at the Grammys last weekend. Now, Charlie Kirk's organization Turning Point USA is hosting a counter-programming and alternative, quote, family-friendly halftime show headlined by Kid Rock. But others counter that Bad Bunny is a smart decision for the NFL in that he'll bring in a new demographic that maybe otherwise wouldn't be watching the Super Bowl, much like Taylor Swift did when she was attending the games and young women started watching the game with their dads in the hopes of catching a glimpse of her. Here to discuss is NewsNation contributor and co-host of The Hill's Rising, Lindsay Granger. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Nice to see you, Batya.
So great to see you. All right, so what can we expect from Bad Bunny? Is he going to be leaning into the controversy surrounding ICE that he did at the Grammys, or do you think he's going to bring a different approach to the Super Bowl halftime show?
You know, I heard him in his press conference about performing, and he said, you don't have to learn Spanish in a week. You don't have to stress out. He wants you to dance. He wants you to dance. And so I think that's what people need to understand, that Bad Bunny is an American citizen from Puerto Rico. I mean, this is an American experience in the same way that anything is an American experience. The number two language in our country is Spanish, you know, most spoken. So I think this is about just pushing the cultural comfort zone. I think it's important to understand that the halftime show has always been global for decades. We're talking about the Rolling Stones. We're talking about U2, Coldplay. There's no pushback when they perform, and not particularly somebody who we saw as like an American big artist. And so we should look at Bad Bunny the same way and just understand that when he criticizes the administration, so is the rest of the world. Look what's happening with Alex Preddy and Renee Good, and now ICE pulling back the amount of officers that are in Minnesota. I mean, there are people looking at the administration on both sides of the aisle saying, hey, maybe something needs to change here. And I think Bad Bunny is one of those people.
For what it's worth, I would have given a lot of pushback if a British star was being invited to host the halftime show. This should be an American, but you're right. Bad Bunny is an American, represents where a lot of Americans are at. So who do you think he's likely to bring on as his surprise guest?
Well, Cardi B is going to be there because her man is there, and it's so funny because I don't know sports that well, but I know girlfriends of the sports stars very well, and so I'm the person that you talked about with their dad that tunes into the game because they want to see the celebrity woman. And so yes, I know that Cardi B will already be in the building cheering for her partner. So I would hope that that's like an easy transition to just get on stage because you're already there.
Right, get in the game, as it were. What did you make of the Turning Point USA's counter programming?
Well, I think Turning Point has to be serious here. I mean, numbers don't lie. Like Kid Rock might have been a star when his album that did really well in 1998, Devil Without a Cause, sold 11 million units worldwide. But again, that was 1998. In 2022, more recently, and this is not counting Bad Bunny's new numbers for his latest album, but his last album in 2022 sold 24 million units worldwide, more relevantly. So when you talk about eyeballs and what's relevant to the world tuning into our Super Bowl, I mean, Kid Rock was relevant in the 90s. Bad Bunny's relevant right now with way more numbers. Numbers don't lie. I don't understand why they would counter it with somebody who is, you know, a star in their own, a rock star in their own, but ancient history at this point to anybody you're trying to get views for.
And do you think the president is going to show up?
To the Turning Points event or to the Super Bowl?
Well, I was thinking to the Super Bowl, but you're right. There's a chance he might show up on the other stream.
I think that the president likes to be in a circumstance where he is not celebrated. And so I know Stephen A. Smith was talking to Cuomo saying that he is not one to avoid making it uncomfortable for others by making his security get him into the Super Bowl. But I think he's going to avoid it because he doesn't want the opportunity for any type of bashing to happen or sitting there like we saw at that White House Correspondents' Dinner when Obama was president and he was, you know, the butt of the joke. He didn't really love that. It seemed like a very uncomfortable moment for him. So I don't think that he wants to be there in a moment where potentially Bad Bunny could make his performance about some of his administration's policies.
Do you think he's going to do that, Bad Bunny?
I'm not fluent in Spanish, so if he does, I'm gonna have to go back and look at it afterwards. I don't know. Honestly, I think he has so much more going for him with the 125 million people that watched the Super Bowl last year. If that number is anything the same, like you said, he also has an opportunity to captivate a new audience larger than the one he has. So I don't think he should make that the only point if he wants to talk about it. I think he should really introduce people to his music. And in the same way that we all danced around when Psy came out with Gangnam Style and we don't know a word of what that man was saying, but it was a global billion streamed hit, we should all celebrate Bad Bunny's music and just dance and have a good time with our families, which is what the Super Bowl is about, the halftime show.
What a beautiful message. Thank you so much for joining me, Lindsay. What an honor to have you. God bless and protect you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Coming up, my winners and losers of the week, who made the cut and who really, really didn't. That's next. Welcome back to the show. Time for our winners and losers of the week, our best and worst, our heroes and our villains. Definitely the hero of the week is the Tongva tribe, who clapped back at singer Billy Eilish for her inane commentary at the Grammys. Eilish joined many others of the glitterati in condemning ICE, but then she took it one step further, claiming that, quote, no one is illegal on stolen land. It was your standard woke nonsense, unbelievably wealthy people masking their enormous privilege in a stupid ideology that allows them to masquerade as better than you, even though you're working 2 jobs and just getting by, and they live in their own gated community, minus the community. Many pointed out that Eilish's own $15 million compound is on stolen Tongva land. And then the Tongva tribe did perhaps the most legendary diss in recent history. They called her out and demanded she at least at them next time, saying, quote, Eilish has not contacted our tribe regarding her property. Billy Eilish's brother responded on Instagram, as far as I am concerned, all of this attention backlash is just part of the death rattle of the current ruling class. Ruling class, you're worth $50 million, you loser. The Tongva tribe are absolute legends for calling out the woke garbage of the elites. As for the loser, it's President Trump. A minute-long video was posted to his Truth Social on hacked voting machines. But at the tail end, for the last 2 seconds, another video appears which depicts the Obamas as monkeys, a classic racist trope about Black people. It's just absolutely disgusting. Now, it's possible the president didn't watch it till the end and never saw the offensive image. It's possible he didn't post it himself. Thankfully, the president appears to have deleted the video. As they say, do better, Mr. President. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to have you. May God bless and protect you in the United States of America.